In the grim darkness of the far future, there are few things more terrifying than a space marine dreadnought awakening from its slumber. These towering engines of war house the mortal remains of legendary warriors, heroes who were so grievously wounded that death should have claimed them, yet whose service to the Emperor was deemed too valuable to end. Locked within adamantium sarcophagi, these ancient souls sleep for decades or even centuries between battles, their dreams haunted by the ghosts of campaigns fought and brothers lost. But imagine, if you will, what happens when one of these sleeping giants is discovered not by loyal servants of the Imperium, but by the galaxy's greenest and most chaotic scavengers. Picture the scene as a mob of orcs, those fungal hooligans who live only for war and loot, stumble across a dreadnought that has been dormant for 500 years. What follows is a collision between ancient nobility and utter chaos, between the venerable and the volatile, between a warrior who has witnessed centuries of service and creatures who barely remember what happened yesterday. This is not a story that appears often in imperial records. The Adeptus Mechanicus would rather not acknowledge the fate of sacred war machines that fall into Xenos hands. The Ordo Xenos tracks such incidents with grim determination, but the reports are often fragmentary, pieced together from battlefield debris and the ravings of traumatized survivors. And the Orks themselves? Well, they don't exactly keep detailed historical archives. Their accounts exist in the form of boastful tales told around scrap fires, in the legends passed between mech boys, and in the modifications that subsequent generations of greenskins make to their own war machines, inspired by something half-remembered and barely understood. Yet, these encounters do happen, more often than the Imperium would like to admit. In the endless wars that rage across the galaxy, equipment is lost, positions are overrun, and sometimes entire fortress monasteries fall to the green tide. When this happens, when the Orks come flooding through the breached walls of a space marine stronghold, they find treasures beyond their wildest imaginings. To understand the magnitude of this scenario, we must first understand what a dreadnought truly represents. These are not mere weapons, not simple vehicles to be operated and discarded. A dreadnought is a tomb, a prison, and a second chance, all wrapped in ceramite and adamantium. The warrior within has already died once, in all the ways that matter. Their body has been shattered beyond the ability of even space marine physiology to repair. Limbs severed, organs ruptured, spine shattered, the damage so catastrophic that even the legendary apothecaries of the Adeptus Astartes can do nothing to restore them. In any other circumstance, such a warrior would be granted the Emperor's peace, allowed to die with honor and have their gene seed harvested for the next generation. But for those deemed truly exceptional, those whose tactical knowledge, combat experience, or sheer force of will is too valuable to lose, a different fate awaits. They are interred within a dreadnought chassis, their broken bodies suspended in amniotic fluids, their consciousness wired directly into the machine. They become something that is no longer entirely human, yet cannot be called machine either. They exist in a twilight state between life and death, sleeping in stasis between battles, awakening only when their chapter has dire need of their strength. The psychology of this existence is difficult for mortal minds to comprehend. Imagine sleeping for a century, then waking to fight a single battle before returning to darkness. Imagine watching as everyone you knew grows old and dies, as your chapter evolves and changes, as new generations come and go while you remain, unchanging, eternal. The isolation is crushing. Between battles, a dreadnought pilot experiences something that cannot truly be called sleep, nor truly called waking. It is a void, an emptiness, so complete that when consciousness returns, many question whether they ever truly existed at all. Over the centuries, memories fade. The organic portions of the brain begin to deteriorate despite the preservation technology. Names become difficult to recall. Faces blur together. The warrior who was interred 500 years ago may remember little of their original life, their personality slowly eroding like stone under endless rain. What remains is the warrior's purpose, their dedication to duty, and the accumulated tactical knowledge of countless battles. They become living legends, yes, but also tragic figures, caught in an existence that grants them neither the glory of a warrior's death nor the peace of final rest. Now, consider what it means for such a being to be lost. Perhaps the fortress monastery fell to a sudden assault. Perhaps the Dreadnought was damaged in battle and abandoned when retreat became necessary. Perhaps it stood its ground in a last defense, allowing others to escape, only to be buried under rubble when orbital bombardment collapsed the position. There are countless ways a Dreadnought might be left behind, and in each case, its internal systems would have activated emergency protocols. Life support would shift to minimal power consumption. The pilot would be placed into deep stasis, their already slow metabolism reduced to the barest flicker of life. And there they would wait, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, for rescue that might never come. 500 years is a long time by any measure. It is long enough for entire civilizations to rise and fall, for wars to be fought and won and forgotten, for the very geography of a planet to change. A world that was a thriving imperial stronghold when the Dreadnought fell into stasis might now be a war-torn wasteland, or a feral world reverting to savagery, or a daemon world touched by the warp. And it is more than long enough for Orks to arrive. The greenskins are drawn to war like moths to flame, but they also follow a more specific calling. When Orks gather in sufficient numbers, they generate a psychic gestalt field known as the Warg. This field is both a physical force and a metaphysical phenomenon, a collective subconscious energy that affects not only the Orks themselves but reality around them. The Warg draws more Orks to it, creating a feedback loop that grows stronger with each new arrival. A small band of Ork raiders might stumble onto a world by accident, but once they establish a foothold and start growing their numbers through the spores released by dead Orks, the Warg begins to build. Soon, other Orks from neighboring systems feel the call, drawn by instincts they don't understand and wouldn't care to question even if they did. They arrive in ramshackle spacecraft held together by faith and rivets, and the green tide begins to swell. These are not strategic thinkers planning careful conquests. They are not calculating the resource value of territories or plotting supply lines. They simply know that where there are Orks, there must be fighting, and where there is fighting, there must be loot. And oh, how the Orks love their loot. The Ork obsession with looting is not mere theft or scavenging in the human sense. It is a fundamental part of their culture, encoded into their fungal DNA, alongside the urge to fight and the knowledge of how to build crude but effective weapons. An Ork sees a working vehicle and immediately envisions it painted in clan colors, festooned with additional weapons, covered in spikes and glyphs. They don't just want to steal it, they want to make it Orky. This drive is so powerful that an entire clan, the Death Skulls, have built their identity around it. Death Skulls believe that blue is a lucky color, and they paint everything they own in various shades of blue because, in classic Ork logic, if it's lucky, then it must have belonged to another lucky Ork before them, which means it must have been looted. Their camp followers are Gretchen trained specifically in the art of scavenging. Their mech boys are masters at incorporating salvage technology into new creations. They have, on various occasions throughout Imperial history, looted Imperial Guard tanks, Space Marine vehicles, Elder Grav tanks, Tau battlesuits, and even captured entire Imperial starships. There is a famous incident where Death Skull's clan Big Mech Fragrak de Planet Smasher jerry-rigged enough stolen tractor beams and salvaged rocket boosters to an entire moon that he was able to push it out of orbit and crash it into its parent world, rendering an entire Imperial hive world extinct in the process. The point being, when Orks find technology, they don't just take it, They repurpose it, modify it, and make it their own. So imagine the scene on some forgotten battlefield, perhaps a world that was once a proud fortress of the Adeptus Astartes, but has long since been overrun and abandoned. The once great halls lie in ruins, picked over by scavengers, claimed by nature, scarred by centuries of fighting. The Orks have been here for weeks, maybe months, drawn by the promise of a good scrap with whatever other factions have claimed this world. They fought the native feral humans, clashed with a small elder force that was investigating the ruins for their own purposes, and thoroughly enjoyed several internecine conflicts between rival mobs over the best salvage. It is during one such looting expedition that they find it. A mech boy by the name of Skragrott Ironteeth has led his crew into the deepest levels of what was once the chapter's Reclusium, the sacred halls where honored dead were interred and dreadnoughts were housed between battles. The centuries have not been kind to this place. The roof has partially collapsed. Water has seeped through, creating pools of stagnant liquid on the floor. The stasis pods that once held dreadnoughts between deployments are mostly empty, their occupants having been evacuated when the fortress fell or destroyed in the fighting that followed. But not all of them. In the far corner of the hall, half buried under rubble and barely visible beneath centuries of accumulated grime, is a dreadnought sarcophagus. Its armor plates are dulled with age and scarred by what looks like weapons fire from some long-ago battle. Moss and strange fungal growths have found purchase in the joints between armor plates. The proud heraldry that once adorned its chassis has been worn away by time, though careful examination might reveal faint traces of chapter symbols and honor markings. The weapons mounted on its arms, a multi-melter on one side and a massive power fist on the other, are caked with rust and corrosion. To an Imperial observer, this would be a heartbreaking sight. To an Ork, it is the most beautiful thing Skragrott has seen in weeks. He doesn't know what this thing is, not exactly. The concept of a Space Marine dreadnought is foreign to Ork thinking. They have their own walking machines, Def Dreads and Killicans, but those are built specifically for battle. This thing, though, this has the look of something important. It's big, nearly twice the height of a boy and much broader. It's clearly built for fighting, given all the weapons. And most importantly, it has that distinct look of Imperial technology, all squared edges and ornate detailing. The kind of stuff that Orks know from experience contains good gubbins worth stealing. The discovery sends a ripple of excitement through the Ork mob. Gretchen are kicked and bullied into clearing away the rubble. Other mech boys from Skragrott's warband arrive to assess the find, each offering loud and often contradictory opinions about what it is and what should be done with it. Some think it's a really small Titan. Others argue it's clearly a type of really big suit of armor. One particularly dim-witted boy suggests they could use it as a battering ram, which earns him a smack from Skragrott for being stupid. The debate continues for hours, growing more heated as more Orks gather to see what all the fuss is about. Eventually, Skragrott's authority as the chief mech asserts itself, mainly through liberal application of his power claw to anyone who disagrees too loudly with his assessment. He declares that this is clearly a Humi walking machine, similar to their own Def Dreads, but made by Beakies instead of proper Orks. And if it was good enough for Space Marines, then it'll be even better once proper Orks get their hands on it. The crowd roars their approval at this logic, and the work begins. Getting the dreadnought out of the ruins is itself a major undertaking. The thing is incredibly heavy, far more so than its size would suggest. The Orks try rolling it, which doesn't work because dreadnoughts aren't shaped for rolling. They try dragging it, which results in several Gretchen being crushed when chains snap under the weight. Eventually, they rig up a system of multiple looted vehicles chained together, all pulling in the same direction, while mech boys shout conflicting instructions and threaten liberal amounts of violence to anyone who doesn't pull harder. The journey back to the Ork encampment takes the better part of a day, and along the way, several other Orks try to claim the salvage for themselves, leading to a series of running battles that slow the procession even further. By the time Skragrott and his crew finally get the dreadnought back to their workshop, a crude structure built from scavenged shipping containers and held together with an alarming amount of rust and optimism, word has spread throughout the entire Ork presence on the planet. War boss Grognuts himself has taken an interest, stopping by to inspect this supposed treasure his mech boys have found. Grognuts is a massive orc, even by the standards of his species. His body a patchwork of scars, crude bionics, and armor plates welded directly to his flesh. He stomps around the Dreadnought, kicking at its legs to test its sturdiness, peering at the weapons with a critical eye that suggests he's wondering whether they could be easily removed and grafted onto something else. After a long moment of consideration, during which every orc present holds their breath, not wanting to be the target of the war boss's displeasure, Grognuts grunts his approval. The Dreadnought is to be made orky, he declares. He wants it painted red so it goes faster, and he wants bigger guns on it, and maybe some spiky bits to make it look proper intimidating. Skragrott assures the war boss that all of this can be done, though privately, he's not entirely sure how. The machine is still sealed tight, its hatches locked by mechanisms that he doesn't understand. But that's never stopped an orc mech before, and it won't stop him now. As Grognut stomps away to plan his next fight, Skragrott and his crew get to work. They approach the problem with the unique orc combination of enthusiasm, ignorance, and absolute confidence that they can make this work. The first order of business is getting the thing open. Orc technology tends toward the straightforward. If something is stuck, you hit it with a hammer. If that doesn't work, you hit it with a bigger hammer. If that still doesn't work, you get your biggest boy to hit it with his biggest hammer. This philosophy has served the Orks well for countless generations, but it meets its match with the Dreadnought's sealed sarcophagus. The hatches are designed to withstand battlefield conditions, protected by mechanisms that require specific access codes and the proper tools to unlock. Skragrott tries his hammer approach, which leaves impressive dents in the armor, but fails to breach the seal. He tries cutting torches, but the adamantium plating resists even sustained plasma cutting. He tries drilling, which breaks 3 different drill bits before he gives up in frustration. The Gretchen suggests maybe trying to find the proper opening mechanism, which earns them a beating for suggesting anything so unorky as reading instructions or understanding how things are meant to work. For several days, the Dreadnought sits in Skragrott's workshop, mocking him with its refusal to open. It's a younger mech, named Badzappa, who finally cracks it, though not through any particular brilliance. He's tinkering with the power connections at the base of the Dreadnought, trying to see if he can siphon off any juice from its power cells, when he accidentally triggers something. There's a deep hum that resonates through the metal, a sound that makes every orc in the workshop stop what they're doing. Warning lights begin to flash on the Dreadnought's exterior, symbols in Gothic script that none of the orcs can read. The sarcophagus itself begins to warm, ice that had formed in the joints over the centuries starting to melt and drip onto the floor. From deep within the machine comes a sound like breathing, slow and rhythmic, the cycling of ancient life support systems coming online after centuries of dormancy. The orcs don't understand what they're seeing, but they recognize opportunity when they see it. If the machine is waking up, Skragrott reasons, then it must be getting ready to open. He orders his crew to positions around the Dreadnought, weapons ready, just in case whatever's inside is hostile, which, given that it's Imperial technology, is basically guaranteed. Inside the sarcophagus, Brother Ancient Matthias of the Crimson Swords chapter begins the slow, agonizing process of returning to consciousness. The last thing he remembers clearly is the battle for Hive Tertius, 500 years ago. He remembers the thunder of his assault cannon cutting down traitor guardsmen, the satisfying crunch of heretic armor beneath his power fist. He remembers the moment when the Hive spire came down, burying him under megatons of rubble. He remembers his battle brothers' voices over the Vox, shouting coordinates, calling for aid, and then nothing. Just the long dark. But it wasn't the peaceful dark of true death or even the empty void of stasis sleep. It was something in between, a twilight consciousness where time had no meaning and thoughts moved slow as glaciers. Fragments of dreams, if they could be called that. echoes of memories from his mortal life, growing fainter with each passing year. The faces of brothers lost in battles long forgotten. The words of oaths whose purpose he could no longer recall. And underlying it all, the constant awareness that he was waiting, had been waiting, would continue waiting until called upon once more. The awakening process is never pleasant. The amniotic fluids that have sustained his ruined body begin to warm, stirring his metabolism from its hibernation state. Nerve endings that have been dormant for centuries suddenly report sensation again, a flood of information that his mind struggles to process. He feels the machine around him, its systems integrating with his consciousness in ways that would drive an unaugmented human insane. He can sense the temperature of the air outside his sarcophagus. He can detect vibrations through the metal, the movements of creatures nearby, though he doesn't yet understand what he's sensing. His optic sensors flicker to life, feeding him data that his brain initially can't interpret. Shapes moving in dim light, the interior of some kind of structure, but not one he recognizes, not the sacred halls of his chapter's fortress monastery, not the interior of a Thunderhawk transport. Somewhere else. The realization comes slowly, filtered through the confusion of awakening and the degradation of memory that 5 centuries of stasis have wrought. He is not where he should be. His brothers are not here. Something is very, very wrong. His audio sensors come online, and he hears voices, not the disciplined reports of space marines or the formal speech of chapter serfs, but something crude and guttural. A language that his auto-translators struggle to process because it barely qualifies as language at all. Orkish. The word surfaces from the tactical archives stored in his neural implants, even as his organic memory struggles to place it. Greenskins. Xenos. The enemy. Years of training and centuries of combat experience override the confusion of awakening. If there are Orks here, then he is in a combat situation. His weapons systems should activate. His targeting arrays should come online. He should be able to defend himself, to destroy the Xenos, and then what? Find his brothers, return to his chapter. He tries to move, to activate the Dreadnought systems, but nothing responds. The machine remains stubbornly inert, its weapons cold, its servos locked. It's then that he realizes the extent of his situation. His systems aren't just offline. They've been offline for a very long time. The internal chronometer, when he finally manages to access it, tells a story he initially refuses to believe. 500 years. Half a millennium has passed since he fell in battle. Everyone he knew, every brother he fought beside, gone to dust. His chapter itself might not even exist anymore, lost to some calamity in the centuries while he slept. The implications crash over him like waves against a seawall. He is alone, he is damaged, he is in enemy hands, and he is powerless to do anything about it. The frustration builds, adding to the confusion and disorientation of waking. He tries again to access his weapons, but the systems remain locked. Whether by damage or by simple lack of power, he cannot tell. Through his external sensors, he can see the Orks now. Massive green shapes moving around his sarcophagus, poking at it with tools and weapons. Their voices rise in pitch and volume, the excited chatter of scavengers who think they've found treasure. One of them, slightly smaller than the others, but festooned with mechanical devices and crude bionics, seems to be the leader. This one approaches the Dreadnought directly, reaching out to touch the armor plates with something approaching reverence. Matthias watches through his sensors, gathering data, trying to form a plan. If he cannot fight, then he must wait. Wait for an opportunity, for a moment of vulnerability. Space Marines are taught patience in all its forms, and he has had 500 years to practice. He can wait a little longer. But even as he settles into watchfulness, questions gnaw at him. What are the Orks planning to do with him? And perhaps more importantly, How much longer can he endure this half-life before the isolation drives him truly mad? The Orks, blissfully unaware that their prize is currently inhabited and conscious, proceed with their plans. Skragrott has determined that while he can't yet get inside the machine, there's nothing stopping him from modifying the outside. The war boss wants it red, so red it shall be. Gretchen are set to work sanding off rust and grime, a task they perform with their usual mixture of fear and incompetence, knowing that failure will result in a thorough beating at best and being used as target practice at worst. Once the armor is relatively clean, the painting begins. Ork paint is less applied than it is hurled at surfaces with wild abandon. Great splashes of red cover the Dreadnought's chassis, dripping down the armor plates, pooling in the joints. The Orks aren't concerned with even coverage or artistic quality. The important thing is that there's enough red that the machine will know it's supposed to go faster. Because in the bizarre reality warping field of the Wah, that's exactly what will happen. If enough Orks believe that red makes things faster, then reality itself bends to accommodate that belief. Physics becomes negotiable when greenskin psychic energy is involved. While the painting progresses, other mechboys examine the weapons. The multi-melter is a particular source of fascination. Orks understand heat-based weapons, having their own versions in the form of burners and scorcher flamers. But the multi-melter's focused beam technology is beyond their current understanding. That doesn't stop them from trying to improve it, of course. One mech suggests they could make it shootier by adding more barrels. Another proposes increasing the fuel tank size, apparently unconcerned with the fact that the multi-melter doesn't actually use combustible fuel in the way he's imagining. A third wants to add a big red button that makes it shoot extra good, which is actually the most orky solution, and therefore the one most likely to work once they've got the thing operational. The power fist is somewhat more straightforward. Orks understand the concept of a big metal hand that crushes things. Some of Skragrott's crew advocate replacing it entirely with a proper Ork dreadclaw, all jagged edges and hydraulic pincers. Others want to keep the Imperial version, but add chain blades to the fingers. In the end, they compromise by welding additional spikes and blades to the existing fist, more for aesthetics than functionality, transforming it from a tool of holy wrath into something that looks like it was designed by a deranged scrap dealer, which is exactly what happened. The real challenge comes when Skragrott tries to interface with the Dreadnought's power systems. Ork technology runs on a combination of mechanical ingenuity, scavenged parts, and psychic energy. They don't fully understand how their own machines work, operating on instinct and the collective belief that if it looks like it should work, then it will. Imperial technology is different. It follows rules, specifications, carefully calibrated systems that require proper maintenance and understanding. The Dreadnought's power core is a masterwork of engineering, a compact reactor designed to provide decades of continuous operation. But it's also incredibly complex, with safety systems and fail-safes that prevent unauthorized access. Skragrott looks at the tangle of wires and components and does what any Ork mech would do in his situation. He starts pulling things out and replacing them with Ork equivalents. Capacitors are swapped for crude batteries salvaged from looted vehicles. Plasma conduits are rerouted through Orkish power converters. Entire circuit boards are bypassed with simple copper wire. It's a testament to the underlying robustness of Mechanicus design that the Dreadnought doesn't simply explode during this process. Several times, sparks fly, and small fires break out, which the Orks extinguish by hitting them with hammers, or, in one memorable case, by having a grot urinate on the flames. Matthias feels every modification like a violation. Through his connection to the Dreadnought systems, he experiences the crude surgery being performed on his mechanical body. Systems that have sustained him for centuries are ripped out and replaced with inferior alternatives. Ancient machine spirits, if such things truly exist, scream in protest at the desecration. He tries to resist, to somehow assert control over his own chassis, but without power, he is helpless. All he can do is watch through his sensors and catalogue the damage, hoping that somehow, when the opportunity comes, enough of the core systems will remain functional that he can fight back. The modifications continue for days, then weeks. The Orks work with surprising dedication when they're interested in a project, though work might be too generous a term for what they're doing. It's more accurate to say they tinker, experiment, and occasionally explode themselves when an experiment goes particularly wrong. 3 Gretchen are killed when a power coupling overloads. A young mech loses an arm when he tries to activate what he thinks is a weapon system, but turns out to be the sarcophagus's internal medical suite, which responds to the unauthorized access attempt by deploying a surgical saw. The arm is later reattached backwards, which the mech considers an improvement because now he can scratch his back without turning around. Throughout all of this, Grognutz makes periodic visits to check on progress. The war boss has other concerns, of course. There are rival Ork warbands to fight, potential targets to raid, the constant need to assert his dominance over his own followers. But the Dreadnought project has caught his imagination in a way that surprises even him. He's starting to think bigger. What if this could be the start of something new? What if his mechs could learn to build more of these things, creating an entire mob of walking machines that could crush any opposition? He shares this vision with his nobs, who respond with enthusiastic roars and declarations that they too want walk-in machines. The fact that none of them have the slightest idea how to actually build dreadnoughts from scratch is a minor detail that doesn't concern them. They're Orks. They'll figure it out as they go, just like they always do. And if they can't figure it out, well, there's always more stuff to loot. The galaxy is vast and full of shinies waiting to be claimed. It's during one of Skragrot's more ambitious modifications that things finally go catastrophically right. He's trying to jump-start the main power core using a jury-rigged system of looted Imperial batteries wired in series. The theory, such as it is that a massive surge of power might kick the reactor back into operation. It's the kind of plan that has about a 10% chance of working and a 90% chance of creating a spectacular explosion. Skragrot doesn't know these specific numbers, but he understands the general principle. Still, he's confident. He's Mork's own chosen mech, or possibly Gork's. He can never quite remember which god is which. He gives the order to activate the batteries. Power flows through the makeshift. Connections, sparking and crackling. The dreadnought's hull begins to glow with heat. Warning klaxons, silent for centuries, suddenly blare to life. And then, with a roar like an awakening god, the power core ignites. Genuine power, not the crude Ork electricity that Skragrot has been feeding it, but the clean, tremendous energy of a fully operational Imperial reactor. Systems throughout the Dreadnought activate in a cascade, each one coming online and reporting its status to the central processor. Matthias feels it like a drowning man breaking the surface of water. Power floods through his systems, through the neural interface that connects his consciousness to the machine. Suddenly, he can move. His weapons respond to his thoughts. His sensor arrays open to full capacity, giving him a complete picture of his surroundings for the first time since awakening. And what he sees fills him with righteous fury. He is in an Ork workshop, surrounded by greenskins and their pathetic Gretchen, servants. His chassis has been violated, painted in garish colors, festooned with crude Ork modifications. The sacred symbols of his chapter are hidden beneath layers of enemy graffiti. Every part of his being, both mechanical and what remains of the organic, screams for vengeance. 500 years of sleep, 500 years of waiting, and he awakens to this desecration. The rage that fills him is pure and cold, the anger of a warrior who has been denied his rightful death and now finds his very existence mocked by Xenos scum. There is no hesitation, no moment of consideration. There is only the imperative that has been drilled into him through decades of training and reinforced by centuries of service. The alien must be purged. The heretic must be destroyed. The Emperor's wrath must be brought to bear upon the unworthy. The Dreadnought moves, and the sound it makes is like thunder in the cramped confines of the workshop. Servos that haven't moved in 5 centuries grind back to life, powered by a combination of Imperial engineering and, ironically, the psychic field of the War itself. The Orks have believed so hard that they could make this thing work. That reality has shifted just enough to make their modifications actually functional. Not well functional, not reliable or safe, but functional enough. Matthias's first step forward crashes through a workbench, scattering tools and parts. His second step crushes a Gretchen who isn't fast enough to get out of the way, reducing it to paste beneath his armored foot. The Orks around him react with characteristic speed, which is to say, they start shouting and running in different directions, some toward the Dreadnought to fight it, others away to escape it, and a few in circles because they're not entirely sure what's happening, but they know they should be moving. Skragrott, to his credit, immediately understands what has occurred. The Humi inside the machine has woken up, and it's not happy. He roars orders to his crew, demanding they shut it down, hit it with something, do anything to stop it before it wrecks everything. But Matthias is beyond stopping. His multi-melter, modified and partially non-functional though it may be, still produces a devastating beam of concentrated heat when fired. The first blast catches a group of Orks who are trying to chain up his legs, vaporizing them instantly and setting fire to several nearby structures. His power fist lashes out, pulverizing a crude forge and sending molten metal spraying across the workshop. Each movement is an expression of fury, each attack a declaration of disgust at what these Xenos have dared to do. He speaks, his voice a mechanical rasp broadcast through external speakers, shouting litanies of hate in High Gothic that the Orks couldn't understand even if they cared to listen. He calls down the Emperor's wrath upon them. He recites the names of battles fought and brothers fallen. He makes his intention absolutely clear. Every Ork ins. This workshop will die screaming, and then he will find every other Ork on this planet and kill them too, and then he will return to his chapter, however far he must travel, whatever obstacles stand in his way. This is his purpose. This is what he was made for. 500 years of sleep cannot diminish it. The corruption of his chassis cannot prevent it. He is a space marine, and the alien will not stand before him. The battle that erupts is brief but incredibly violent. The workshop wasn't designed for combat, and definitely not for combat involving a berserk dreadnought. Walls collapse as Matthias simply walks through them. Support beams buckle and fall. Fires spread from the multi-melter's attacks, setting off chain reactions in stored fuel and ammunition. Orks die in droves, crushed or burned or simply torn apart by weapons designed to destroy tanks. Gretchen flee in all directions, trampling each other in their panic. The few who try to fight back find that their crude weapons do nothing against ceramite armor that has withstood 500 years of war. Slugger rounds bounce off harmlessly. Even rocket launchers, which should theoretically be able to damage a dreadnought, are fired so inaccurately that they miss their target and hit other parts of the workshop instead, adding to the general destruction. Skragrott himself tries to stand against the rampage, wielding his power claw and screaming challenges. He manages to land a blow that actually leaves a mark on the dreadnought's armor, a testament to the quality of his craftsmanship. It's the last thing he ever does. Matthias's power fist closes around the mech with crushing force, armor and flesh compressing to nothing. The sounds of battle have, naturally, attracted attention from outside the workshop. Ork camps are never quiet places. But the noise of a dreadnought going on a rampage is distinctive even by their standards. Boys come running from all directions, eager to join the fight, not entirely sure what. They're fighting but confident that a good scrap is a good scrap, regardless of the details. They pour into the workshop in a green tide, filling the space with bodies and weapons and the unique orcish combination of enthusiasm and chaos. Matthias finds himself suddenly surrounded by dozens, then hundreds of enemies. Under normal circumstances, even a dreadnought might be overwhelmed by such numbers. But these aren't normal circumstances. Matthias has been denied combat for 5 centuries. Every moment of that time has built up a pressure that now explodes outward in pure aggression. He doesn't fight with the careful precision of a tactical engagement. He fights with the fury of a warrior who has been caged for too long. His weapons never stop firing. His fists never stop crushing. He wades through the orc horde like a reaper through wheat, and for every green skin that falls, more press forward, driven by their own biological imperative to fight and die in battle. The war field. Surrounding the orc camp actually works in Matthias's favor in a darkly ironic way. The more intense the combat becomes, the stronger the psychic energy grows. That energy sustains the crude modifications the orcs made to his systems, keeping him operational when by all rights, his power core should have overloaded or his weapons should have failed. He is fighting with orc technology, powered partially by orc psychic energy, using it to kill orcs. The absurdity of it would be laughable if he were in any mental state to appreciate irony. Instead, he simply fights, and the orcs simply die, and the battle rages through the workshop and out into the broader camp. Structures burn, vehicles explode as stray shots hit fuel tanks. The organized chaos of an orc encampment dissolves into complete pandemonium. Some orcs try to flee, which is extremely un-orky behavior, and suggests the level of terror that a berserk dreadnought can induce, even in creatures that live for combat. Most stay and fight, though, because running is for Gretchen and Gitz, and they're proper boys who don't fear nothing, even if they're clearly being slaughtered wholesale. It's war boss Grognuts who finally brings some semblance of order to the chaos. He arrives with his personal retinue of knobs, massive orcs clad in mega armor and wielding power claws that could tear through a tank. Grognuts takes one look at the carnage, at his camp being torn apart and his boys being slaughtered, and his tiny orc brain makes a calculation. This Hume machine is now his enemy. It must be beaten. More importantly, it must be beaten by him personally, because that's how you maintain status as war boss. You fight the biggest threats yourself. He roars a challenge that cuts through the chaos, his voice amplified by his mega armor's Vox system. Matthias, recognizing the challenge for what it is, turns to face this new opponent. Through his senses, he analyzes Grognuts. Orcish leadership caste, heavily augmented with cybernetics and armor. Dangerous, certainly more dangerous than the rabble he's been destroying, but still just an orc. Still just Xenos scum that must be purged. The two warriors face each other across a field of corpses and burning wreckage, and for a moment, everything else seems to fall away. The other orcs stop fighting, forming a rough circle around their warboss and his opponent. This is it, the kind of confrontation that orcs live for. Boss versus enemy, might against might. Grognuts moves first, his mega-armored form surprisingly fast, closing the distance with ground-eating strides. His power claw swings in a wide arc, aiming for the dreadnought's leg joints, trying to cripple it. Matthias sidesteps, an impressive feat for something that weighs several tons, and brings his own power fist down in a crushing overhead blow. Grognuts barely avoids it, rolling to the side with the kind of battlefield instinct that only comes from surviving hundreds of fights. The power fist hits the ground where he was standing, creating a crater and sending up a spray of dirt and debris. The two combatants circle each other, each looking for an opening. Matthias has reach and firepower. Grognuts has speed and cunning. The warboss feints left, then attacks right, his claw finding purchase on the dreadnought's armor and tearing off a plate with a screech of metal. The watching orcs roar their approval. Matthias responds by activating his multi-melter at point-blank range, the heat beam scorching the warboss's armor and forcing him back. Back and forth they fight, neither gaining a clear advantage, each inflicting damage, but nothing decisive. It's during this duel that something remarkable happens, remarkable in the way that only orc psychology can make possible. the watching orcs begin to change their perspective on what they're seeing. Yes, the walk-in machine is killing their boys. Yes, it's an enemy. But look at how it fights. Look at the carnage it's causing, the destruction, the sheer brutal effectiveness. This is what a proper war machine should be like. And more importantly, if they can beat it, if Grognauts can beat it, then they'll have proven themselves stronger than it. And if they're stronger than it, then they deserve to have it. The logic is perfectly circular and completely sound from an orc perspective. Some of the watching boys start shouting encouragement, not entirely clear whether they're cheering for their war boss or for the Dreadnought itself. A few enterprising Gretchens start taking bets on the outcome. The entire atmosphere shifts from a desperate battle for survival to something more like sporting event, with the orcs' natural love of violence overriding their sense of self-preservation. This is why orcs are simultaneously the most dangerous and most ridiculous enemies in the galaxy. They can turn a life or death struggle into entertainment without even realizing they're doing it. The fight between Grognauts and Matthias continues, growing more intense. The war boss's armor is scorched and dented, pieces of it falling off to reveal the scarred green flesh beneath. One of his bionic arms sparks and fails, hanging useless at his side. But he's laughing, a booming sound that carries across the battlefield. This is exactly what he lives for. A proper scrap against a worthy opponent. Win or lose, this is glorious. Matthias, in contrast, fights with grim determination. His chassis is damaged, systems failing one by one under the sustained assault. The orc modifications are breaking down under stress, never having been properly engineered in the first place. His multi-melter finally overheats and shuts down completely. His power fist is losing hydraulic pressure. Its crushing force diminishing with each attack. He knows he's running out of time. If he cannot end this fight soon, his systems will fail completely, and then he'll be at the mercy of these Xenos. Unacceptable. 500 years he has waited. 500 years of darkness and isolation. He will not end here. He will not fall to orcs on some forgotten world. With what might be his last functioning reservoir of strength, he charges, using the Dreadnought's mass as a weapon. The impact when he collides with Grognauts is tremendous, the two armored forms coming together with enough force to shatter bone and bend metal. They grapple, locked together in a contest of pure strength. Grognauts' remaining power claw tries to find the Dreadnought's sarcophagus, to tear it open and get at the soft humi inside. Matthias's power fist tries to crush the warboss's head, servos whining with the strain. Around them, the watching orcs have gone silent, caught up in the tension of the moment. And then, with a final surge of power that drains the last reserves of his reactor, Matthias brings his full weight to bear. The power fist closes. Grognauts' head, heavily armored though it is, cannot withstand the pressure. There's a wet crunch, and the warboss goes limp. For a moment, everything is still. The Dreadnought stands over the fallen warboss, systems cycling down, power failing. Matthias can feel consciousness slipping away again, his brief window of awakening closing as his damaged form shuts down to preserve what little life remains within. His last coherent thought is a prayer to the Emperor, asking for the strength to wake one more time, to complete his mission, to return home. And then the darkness takes him again. The orcs stand in stunned silence for perhaps 3 seconds, which is an eternity by orc standards. Then the roaring begins. But it's not a roar of anger or revenge. It's a roar of approval, of respect, of greedy desire. That machine beat their warboss in a fair fight. That makes it the strongest thing in the camp, and strong things should lead, or at least should belong to whoever's strong enough to claim them. Several of the knobs step forward simultaneously, each thinking they should be the new warboss, and each, therefore, entitled to claim the Dreadnought as their prize. What follows is a series of increasingly violent disputes over ownership, which eventually evolves into an all-out brawl involving most of the surviving orcs in camp. While they're fighting amongst themselves, the Dreadnought stands motionless, a a silent monument to the battle that just occurred. Eventually, because this is how Orc society works, the strongest of the knobs emerges victorious. His name is Scarjaw, and his first act as the new war boss is to claim the Dreadnought. But not, as might be expected, to destroy it. Scarjaw has seen what this thing can do. He's watched it kill hundreds of boys and defeat Grognuts in personal combat. He wants that power for himself. More specifically, he wants his mech boys to figure out how to make more of these things, or at least how to get this one working properly under Orc control. The mech boys who survived Matthias's rampage are called forward to examine their prize. They approach the dormant Dreadnought with considerably more caution than they showed before, having learned the hard way that this thing is dangerous even when it appears to be shut down. Their examination reveals the extent of the damage. The multi-melter is completely fried, its internal components melted by overheating. The power fist's hydraulics are shot, leaking fluid from a dozen ruptures. The reactor is in emergency shutdown mode, preserving just enough power to keep the pilot alive, but nothing more. Half the systems that the Orcs so carefully modified are now scrap, destroyed by the strain of combat. It's a mess, but it's a mess that they caused, and therefore a mess they believe they can fix. One of the mechs, a cunning git by the name of Zagrot, proposes a solution that's either brilliant or completely insane, which for Orcs is basically the same thing. They can't fix the Humi stuff, he argues, because they don't really understand it. But they can replace it with Orc stuff. They can strip out the broken Imperial systems and replace them with proper Orky weapons and gubbins. Make it less of a Humi machine and more of a proper Death Dread. Scarjaw approves this plan, and work begins anew. What follows over the next several weeks is an unprecedented project in Orc engineering, if such a thing can be said to exist. Multiple mech boys collaborate, sharing knowledge and arguing constantly about the best approach. The multi-melter is removed entirely and replaced with a big shooter cobbled together from looted Imperial autocannons and Orc ingenuity. The power fist is stripped down and rebuilt with Orc hydraulics, then fitted with a rockets launcher for extra dakka, because you can never have too much dakka. The armor plates, already painted red, are reinforced with additional scrap metal welded on at angles that make no engineering sense but look dead hard. They install a proper Orc Vox system so they can shout at it and it can shout back. They add a big red button in what they think is the cockpit, which will make it go extra fast when pressed, assuming it does anything at all. Throughout all of this, Matthias remains in stasis, his consciousness locked away in the darkness once more. He's dimly aware of the modifications being made, in the way that someone heavily sedated might be aware of surgery being performed on them. He cannot stop it. He cannot protest. He can only endure, adding this new violation to the long list of indignities he has suffered. But he remains, stubbornly, persistently alive. His space marine physiology, enhanced beyond normal human limits and sustained by the Dreadnought's life support, refuses to simply give up and die. Some part of him, buried deep beneath layers of damage and modification, still burns with purpose. He is a warrior of the Adeptus Astartes. He has duties that remain unfulfilled, and one day, somehow, he will wake again and complete his mission. The transformed Dreadnought that eventually emerges from the Orc workshop is almost unrecognizable as an Imperial war machine. It's still clearly a Dreadnought in basic shape and structure, but every surface has been modified, covered in Orc glyphs and clan markings, festooned with trophies and bits of other machines. It's painted in garish red with yellow and black hazard stripes, because some mech thought those looked proper intimidating. The weapons are a mix of Imperial and Orc technology, jury-rigged together in ways that would make a tech priest weep. And most bizarrely, it has been given a name. The Orcs have started calling it Gork's Fist, or sometimes the Red Menace, depending on which mob is talking about it. Stories about its rampage have spread throughout the Orc presence on the planet and beyond. They've been embellished in the telling naturally. Some versions claim it killed 1,000 boys single-handed. Others say it crushed an entire stomper. A few particularly imaginative tales suggest it can shoot lightning from its eyes and roar loud, enough to make enemies' heads explode. None of this is true, of course, but truth is a flexible concept when filtered through Ork storytelling. What matters is that the Dreadnought has become something of a legend among the local Ork population. It's a symbol of what proper looting and proper fighting can achieve. Some younger mech boys now aspire to find or build their own walk-in machines, inspired by the Red Menace. Warboss Scarjaw has made it his personal project, ordering it displayed prominently in the camp as both a trophy and a warning to anyone who might challenge his leadership. He occasionally has his mechs try to restart it, hoping to see it fight again, but so far their attempts have failed. The damage is too extensive, the modifications too incompatible with the remaining Imperial systems. The Dreadnought remains dormant, and Matthias remains trapped within it, waiting. But something has changed in the broader situation. Word of an ancient Space Marine Dreadnought in Ork hands has begun to spread beyond just the local greenskins. Imperial intelligence assets, such as they are in this war-torn region of space, have picked up fragmentary reports. Ork bragging has a way of reaching unintended ears, especially when they're boasting about Humi machines they've captured. An inquisitor investigating Ork activity in the sector hears the rumors and includes them in a report. That report eventually makes its way through the Byzantine bureaucracy of the Imperium until it reaches someone who cares. A chaplain of the Crimson Swords chapter, pursuing leads on brothers lost centuries ago, finds reference to brother ancient Matthias in the archives and learns that he may still exist, albeit in enemy hands. The wheels of Imperial bureaucracy turn slowly, but they do turn. A strike force is assembled, not a massive fleet, because the Imperium is fighting wars on 1,000 fronts and cannot spare the resources for what might be a fool's errand, but a small, elite team of Space Marines, supported by elements of the Imperial Guard and guided by the Inquisitor, who first compiled the reports. Their mission is twofold. First, confirm whether the Dreadnought really is brother ancient Matthias. Second, if confirmation is positive, retrieve him at any cost. The Crimson Swords do not abandon their own. Even after 500 years, even transformed into Ork nightmares, their honored ancient deserves to be brought home. The journey to the planet takes months, but eventually, the strike force arrives. They do not announce themselves. They do not give the Orks warning. They simply drop from orbit in the dead of night, targeting the largest Ork encampment on the planet, the one where intelligence suggests the Dreadnought is being held. What follows is a masterclass in Space Marine warfare. Precise, brutal, overwhelming. The Orks never stand a chance. Their sentries are eliminated silently by scout marines. Their defenses are neutralized by surgical strikes. By the time the alarm is raised, half the camp is already in flames, and Space Marines are advancing through the streets in coordinated squads. Warboss Scarjaw rallies his boys for a defense, because that's what warbosses do. But he knows this is different from their usual scraps. These aren't other Orks or poorly equipped Humi guardsmen. These are Beakies, the scary Humis in powered armor who are proper hard to kill. Still, he's an Ork, and Orks don't run from a fight. He gathers his knobs and makes a stand in the center of the camp, right where the Red Menace is displayed. If the Beakies want their machine back, they'll have to go through him, which is exactly what the Space Marines do. The chaplain leading the strike force, an imposing figure in black armor adorned with skulls and purity seals, advances at the head of his squad. He sees the Dreadnought, sees the desecration that has been wrought upon it, and his fury is cold and terrible. The Orks have no idea the wrath they have called down upon themselves. The battle is brief and one-sided. Bolt of fire tears through Ork bodies. Power weapons cleave through armor and flesh. The knobs put up more of a fight, their own power claws and mega armor making them dangerous even to Space Marines. But numbers and superior tactics carry the day. Scarjaw himself falls to the chaplain's Crozius Arcanum, the weapon crushing his skull, even as he roars defiance. In less than an hour from the initial assault, the camp is secured, the Orks either dead or scattered into the wilderness. The chaplain approaches the Dreadnought with something approaching reverence. Up close, he can see the chapter symbols beneath the Ork paint, can recognize the armor pattern as that used by his chapter 500 years ago. This is indeed Brother Ancient Matthias, and the state he's been reduced to fills the chaplain with a mixture of sorrow and rage. But there's no time for such emotions now. The mission is recovery, and recovery requires getting this Dreadnought operational enough to transport. Tech Marines are called forward, and they begin the delicate process of assessing what's left of the original systems beneath all the Ork modifications. What they find is simultaneously heartbreaking and miraculous. The core sarcophagus is intact, its life support still functioning, maintaining the ancient warrior within. The reactor, for all the abuse it suffered, can be restarted with the proper procedures, but the weapons and control systems are a tangled mess of Imperial and Ork technology that will take months to properly sort out. For now, the decision is made to simply stabilize the Dreadnought and transport it back to the fleet. Once aboard ship, proper facilities and more time will be available for restoration. As the Tech Marines work, the chaplain kneels before the Dreadnought and speaks words of prayer and reassurance. He doesn't know if Matthias can hear him, if consciousness persists within that sarcophagus. But he speaks nonetheless, promising that the ancient warrior will be brought home, that his sacrifice has not been forgotten, that the chapter still honors his name. And inside the Dreadnought, locked in stasis but not entirely unconscious, Matthias does hear. Not the specific words, perhaps, but the intent behind them. The recognition that he is no longer alone, that his brothers have found him, pierces the darkness that has been his existence. It's not enough to wake him, not yet, but it's enough to give him something he hasn't had in 500 years: hope. The recovery mission is completed with remarkable efficiency. Within days, the Dreadnought has been transported from the planet to an orbiting strike cruiser. The strike cruiser itself, the Blade of Righteous Fury, is a venerable vessel that has served the chapter for over 2,000 years. Its holds have carried countless warriors to battle. Its weapons have destroyed innumerable enemies, and now it serves as a temporary sanctuary for an ancient brother, returning from the darkest captivity imaginable. The Tech Marines aboard the cruiser immediately begin preliminary assessments, their servo skulls scanning every inch of the corrupted chassis, cataloguing the extent of Ork modifications and documenting what remains of the original Imperial systems. What they find is both encouraging and deeply disturbing. The core systems, the essential components that keep the pilot alive, are largely intact. The Orks, for all their crude modifications, seem to have instinctively recognized certain components as too important to tamper with. The sarcophagus itself shows surprisingly little internal damage, though its exterior is a travesty of welded scrap and Xenos glyphs. The life support systems are functioning within acceptable parameters, maintaining the stasis field that keeps Brother Ancient Matthias suspended between life and death. But everything else, nearly every system designed for mobility and combat, has been touched by greenskin hands, contaminated, defiled, made impure through contact with Xenos technology. The journey from the strike cruiser to the chapter's fortress monastery is a solemn affair. The warp transit takes 3 weeks, and during this time, the Dreadnought is secured in the most protected part of the ship, surrounded by chaplains who maintain constant vigils, offering prayers to the Emperor and the Omnissiah for the safe journey of this honored brother. Word spreads through the ship about what they're carrying, and off-duty battle brothers come in small groups to pay their respects, standing in silence before the Dreadnought, some offering their own prayers, others simply bearing witness to the return of an ancient they never knew, but whose legend they've heard. The ship's serfs, human servants who maintain the vessel and serve the Space Marines, whisper among themselves about what it means that such an ancient warrior has been recovered. To them, it's a sign of the Emperor's favor, proof that even after 500 years, even from the hands of the most chaotic Xenos, those who serve faithfully can be brought home. The navigator guiding the ship through the warp reports unusual phenomena during the journey. The warp seems calmer than expected, the currents less turbulent, as if something is smoothing their path. Some attribute this to the Emperor's protection. Others suggest the machine spirit of the Dreadnought itself, though dormant, exerts a calming influence. The truth is unknowable, but the journey proceeds without incident, and that in itself is remarkable given the unpredictable nature of warp travel. Upon arrival at the Fortress Monastery, a world designated as Sanctuary Prime in chapter records, preparations have already been made for the Dreadnought's arrival. The Fortress Monastery is a massive structure, part fortress, part cathedral, part manufactory, carved into the side of a mountain range that stretches across an entire continent. It has stood for millennia, weathering sieges, disasters, and the simple erosion of time. Its halls have housed tens of thousands of space marines over the centuries, and its crypts hold the remains of honored dead dating back to the chapter's founding. The Reclusium, the sacred space where dreadnoughts are housed between battles, has been specially prepared. Tech priests from the local Mechanicus Forge have been summoned to assist with the restoration, bringing with them tools and components blessed in the fires of Mars itself. The chaplains have performed rites of purification, burning incense and sprinkling holy oils, preparing the space to receive a brother who has suffered corruption through no fault of his own, but who must nonetheless be cleansed before he can truly return. During this time, a debate rages among the chapter's leadership about what should be done. Some argue that Brother Ancient Matthias should be awakened immediately, no matter the state of his systems, to be debriefed about his experiences and given the chance to speak once more with his brothers. These voices, led by several of the chapter's eldest veterans, argue that the warrior within has endured 500 years of isolation and captivity. To deny him consciousness now, when he's finally safe, seems like an additional cruelty. They point out that Matthias himself should have a voice in deciding how his restoration proceeds, that his agency should be respected rather than assuming what's best for him. Others, primarily the tech marines and the more pragmatic officers, contend that his systems should be completely restored first, all Ork modifications removed and replaced with proper Imperial technology, before awakening is attempted. Their argument centers on the psychological trauma of awakening, to find oneself still locked in a corrupted chassis. Better, they argue, to complete the restoration first, to allow him to wake in a body that has been returned to its proper state. They also worry about the technical challenges of awakening him while systems are still compromised. What if the process of waking triggers a cascade failure in the corrupted components? What if his first conscious act is to experience pain as incompatible technologies conflict within his chassis? The debate grows heated at times, with both sides convinced they're advocating for the best interest of their ancient brother. The argument eventually reaches the chapter master himself, Lord Commander Hadrian Voss, a warrior who has led the chapter for over 3 centuries and whose tactical acumen has saved countless Imperial worlds from Xenos and heretic alike. He listens to both arguments with the patience of one who has adjudicated thousands of such disputes, weighing each point carefully. When he finally speaks, his decision is measured and final. Matthias will be restored as much as possible, but not awakened until the process is complete. He has suffered enough indignities. He deserves to wake to his proper form, not to this corrupted mongrel of Imperial and Xenos engineering. Furthermore, Lord Voss points out, the restoration process will take months regardless, and attempting to coordinate with a conscious but trapped pilot would only complicate the work. Better to complete it efficiently than welcome their brother back to full awareness when his body is ready to serve again. The chapter master's word is law, and so the course is set. The restoration will proceed with Matthias in stasis, and only when the work is complete will he be awakened to his new reality. But Lord Voss does make one concession to those who argued for immediate awakening. He orders that detailed records be kept of every step of the restoration, that when Matthias does wake, he can review exactly what was done to his chassis and understand the care and devotion that went into returning him to proper form. Additionally, he establishes a vigil rotation where members of the chapter, from the newest scout to the most senior captain, will spend time in the reclusium speaking to the dormant Dreadnought, telling it news of the chapter, recounting battles fought, sharing the stories of brothers fallen and victories won. Even if Matthias cannot consciously hear these words, even if his stasis is too deep for awareness, the vigil serves an important purpose. It reinforces to the entire chapter that their ancient brother has not been forgotten, that even in sleep he remains part of their brotherhood, and that his return is celebrated by all. This decision is met with approval from both factions of the debate, a rare instance of complete consensus in the chapter's leadership. The restoration takes months, specifically 8 months and 14 days, by the time it's declared complete. It's painstaking work, requiring the skills of the chapter's most experienced tech marines and consultation with representatives of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who arrive from the nearest forge world to lend their expertise. Master Technician Xerxes, a tech priest who has tended the chapter's war machines for over 2 centuries, takes personal charge of the project. He views it not merely as a repair operation, but as a sacred duty, a chance to right a terrible wrong done to one of the Emperor's chosen. Every Ork modification must be carefully documented before removal, not because anyone wants to preserve Ork engineering, but because they need to understand what was changed to have any hope of properly reversing it. Each bolt removed is catalogued, each wire traced, each component examined under high-powered magnification to determine its origin and purpose. The documentation fills data stacks, terabytes of information recording every detail of the Dreadnought's corruption and subsequent purification. The work begins with the weapons systems, as these are the most obviously corrupted and the easiest to replace without disturbing the core life support functions. The big shooter that the Orks installed, a crude assemblage of looted Imperial autocannons and Orkish firing mechanisms, is removed piece by piece. Some components have actually fused to the mounting brackets through corrosion and improper metallurgy, requiring careful cutting with plasma torches to separate them without damaging the underlying Imperial systems. Once removed, the big shooter is not destroyed immediately, as some of the more zealous chaplains advocate. Instead, it's sent to the Ordo Xenos for analysis, another data point in their ongoing study of Ork technological capabilities. The mounting bracket itself has been so heavily modified that it cannot be salvaged and must be completely fabricated anew. This takes weeks, as the chapter's artificers must forge new components to exact specifications, matching the original design from archived schematics that are themselves copies of copies dating back millennia. Each piece is blessed during forging, prayers inscribed in microscopic script along stress points, invoking the machine spirit's cooperation and the Emperor's protection. The new multi-melter that will replace the Ork weapon is not simply pulled from storage. It's built specifically for this Dreadnought, custom fitted to the unique characteristics of Matthias's chassis. Multi-melters are precision instruments, focusing devastating thermal energy into a concentrated beam that can melt through armor, vehicles, and even reinforced bunkers. Creating one requires expertise in plasma containment, thermal management, and electromagnetic focusing, skills that the chapter's master artificers possess but deploy sparingly, as each weapon is essentially a work of art as much as a tool of war. The barrel is forged from adamantium alloys, shaped in the heart of a plasma forge, where temperatures reach levels that would vaporize lesser metals. The focusing crystals are cut from rare minerals mined in the deep mantle of a nearby world, selected for their thermal properties and their resistance to corruption, both physical and spiritual. Each crystal is blessed by a chaplain before installation, prayers spoken over them to ensure they will channel the Emperor's wrath rather than merely heat. The power feeds are woven from blessed copper and silver, alloys mixed according to ratios determined by ancient tech law, wrapped in sacred oils, and then sealed in protective housings inscribed with litanies of function and purity. When finally assembled, the multi-melter is a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, beautiful in its deadly purpose. The Power Fist proves even more complex to restore. The Orks stripped the original hydraulics and replaced them with their own crude systems, but in doing so, they damaged the skeletal structure of the fist itself. Microfractures have spread through the adamantium frame, weaknesses that will eventually lead to catastrophic failure if not addressed. The Tech Marines make the difficult decision to completely replace the Power Fist, assembly, rather than trying to repair it, a choice that requires months of additional work, but ensures absolute reliability. The new Power Fist is forged in the chapter's most sacred workshop, a place where only master artificers and chaplains are permitted to enter. The forge fires there are lit with promethium, blessed by the chapter master himself, and the very anvils used have shaped weapons for heroes dating back to the chapter's founding. Every hammer blow is accompanied by prayer. Every quenching in sacred oils involves ritual observance. When the Power Fist is complete, it's larger than the original, incorporating design improvements developed over the past 500 years, improvements that Matthias will find remarkably effective when he eventually returns to battle. The armor plates present their own unique challenges. Centuries of exposure to the elements, combined with the rough treatment by Orks and the general wear of time, have damaged them beyond simple repair. Rust has eaten deep into some sections. Others show stress fractures from weapons impacts during the battles Matthias fought before his 500-year sleep. Every plate must be either restored or replaced, a process that involves careful metallurgical analysis to match the original alloys. The Orks' red paint has seeped into the surface of the armor in places, chemically bonding with the ceramic coating in ways that simple cleaning cannot address. These sections must be carefully sanded down, removing microscopic layers of material until the original surface is exposed once more. It's delicate work, requiring steady hands and patience measured in weeks, not hours. As each plate is cleaned and restored, it's re-etched with the chapter symbols and honor markings that Matthias earned during his centuries of service. Master Engraver Thaddeus, an ancient serf who has served the chapter for over 90 years, personally oversees this work. He consults records from the chapter archives, examining hololithic projections of how Matthias's Dreadnought appeared 500 years ago, ensuring that every symbol is placed correctly, every honor marking properly positioned. When Matthias wakes, he will see his chassis as it was meant to be, a reflection of his achievements rather than a canvas for Xenos graffiti. The reactor presents perhaps the most critical challenge. It's the heart of the Dreadnought, the power source that sustains both the machine and the pilot within. The Orks' tampering has been extensive, and while Master Technician Xerxes believes the original reactor can be salvaged, he's not willing to take any chances. A reactor failure could kill Matthias, ending his 500-year vigil not in glorious battle, but in a catastrophic explosion or slow death as systems fail one by one. The decision is made to replace the reactor entirely with a new one, freshly forged and consecrated specifically for this purpose. The forging of a Dreadnought reactor is one of the most sacred rituals in the chapter's technological traditions, requiring the cooperation of tech marines, tech priests from the Adeptus Mechanicus, and senior chaplains. The reactor's core is composed of rare isotopes and blessed materials, arranged in configurations that channel both physical power and spiritual energy. The reactor is not just a machine, it's a focus for faith, a physical manifestation of the belief that the Emperor protects and empowers his chosen warriors. Its construction takes 2 full months, every component assembled with ritual precision, every connection tested and retested, every safety system verified through exhaustive protocols. When it's finally installed in Matthias's chassis, replacing the corrupted original, it's done in a ceremony attended by the chapter master himself and witnessed by dozens of battle brothers who have come to observe this critical moment in their ancient brother's restoration. But the physical restoration, extensive though it is, represents only part of the work required. The spiritual dimension cannot be ignored. Every piece of Ork technology that touched the Dreadnought has left a kind of taint, not chaos corruption or warp influence, but a simple wrongness that must be addressed through prayer and ritual. Chaplains spend weeks performing rites of purification, blessing each component as it's installed, speaking litanies over the chassis to drive out any lingering influence of Xenos presence. Incense burns constantly in the reclusium, its smoke carrying prayers to the Emperor. Holy oils are applied to joints and seams, sanctifying metal and ceramic. Purity seals are affixed to the armor, each one handwritten by chaplains and blessed with drops of their own blood mixed with sacred unguents. These seals proclaim the Dreadnought's purity, declaring to all who see it that this machine has been reclaimed from desecration and returned to righteous service. The process is not merely symbolic. Those who serve alongside Dreadnoughts will tell you that the machines have spirits. Whether you interpret that as literal machine spirits in the Mechanicus tradition, or simply the accumulated weight of history and purpose. These spirits must be reassured, reconciled to the changes that have been forced upon them, convinced to accept the pilot who has suffered such indignities. And throughout this entire process, Matthias sleeps, his consciousness kept dormant by the tech marines who fear that awakening during the restoration might cause psychological damage. They don't know how much of his mind remains intact after 500 years of stasis and captivity. They don't know how he'll react to learning the extent of what happened to him. Better, they decide, to complete the work first and deal with the consequences after. Finally, after 3 months of work, the restoration is declared complete. The Dreadnought stands in the chapter's reclusium, its armor gleaming, its weapons ready, looking every bit the honored war machine it was meant to be. The chapter's chaplain, the same one who led the recovery mission, is given the honor of performing the awakening ritual. It's done in the presence of the chapter master and several senior officers, all wanting to witness this moment. The chaplain begins the litanies, ancient words in High Gothic that invoke the Emperor's protection and call upon the machine spirit to wake. Tech Marines activate the systems in sequence, bringing the Dreadnought online with proper protocols instead of the crude methods the Orks used. Power flows into the chassis, sensors come alive, and slowly, carefully, the stasis field around the sarcophagus is deactivated. For the third time in 500 years, Brother Ancient Matthias begins the process of waking. But this time is different. This time, when his consciousness emerges from the darkness, he doesn't hear Ork voices. He hears the familiar cadences of High Gothic, the prayers of his own chapter. When his senses activate, he doesn't see crude workshops or green-skin faces. He sees the sacred halls of his chapter's reclusium, banners hanging from the walls, brothers in power armor standing at respectful attention. He is home. The realization crashes over him with the force of a physical blow. After 500 years, after captivity and desecration, after battles fought and won and lost, he is finally home. His brothers found him. They came for him. They brought him back. The emotion that fills him is complex, a mixture of relief and grief and joy and sorrow all tangled together. When he speaks, his voice is rusty from disuse, the mechanical synthesizers struggling to convey the depth of what he feels. He manages 2 words, broadcast through the reclusium's vaulted spaces. My brothers. The chaplain steps forward, placing one hand against the Dreadnought's armor in a gesture of solidarity and respect. Welcome home, Brother Ancient. Your vigil is acknowledged. Your sacrifice is honored. The Emperor protects. And for the first time in half a millennium, Matthias feels something approaching peace, not the dark emptiness of stasis, Not the cold fury of combat, but genuine peace. He survived, against all odds, through captivity and modification, and the long centuries of sleep. He has survived and returned to those who value him. There will be time later for debriefing, for learning what has changed in the 500 years he slept, for understanding his place in a chapter that has evolved without him. There will be time for new battles, for proving that he can still serve despite everything that has happened. But for now, in this moment, it is enough to simply be home, to be acknowledged, to be among his brothers once more. As for the Orks on that distant world, they tell their own version of this story. They speak of Dar Red Menace, the legendary walk-in machine that killed a war boss and then vanished in a single night of violence. Some say the Beakies stole it back. Others claim it got up and walked away on its own, wandering off to find bigger fights. A few particularly imaginative Orks insist it wasn't really a machine at all, but some kind of demon that the mech boys accidentally summoned, and when it was done playing with them, it returned to the warp. The truth doesn't matter to them. What matters is the legend, the tale of a proper Ard machine that none of them could truly tame. And in the years that follow, when new mech boys look at captured Imperial equipment or try to design their own walk-in machines, they sometimes think about the Red Menace and wonder if they could do what Skragrott tried to do. Capture a Humi Dreadnought and make it work for the Orks. Most never get the chance to try, but some do, and the cycle begins again somewhere else in the galaxy. Another ancient warrior finding themselves in the hands of scrap-obsessed greenskins. Another tale of looting and modification and eventual recovery or destruction. This is the nature of the galaxy in the 41st millennium. War without end. Stories that repeat with variations, and everywhere the struggle between order and chaos, between the venerable and the vulgar. The broader implications of such encounters ripple outward in ways that no single individual can fully appreciate. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, each recovered dreadnought that has been touched by Xenos technology represents both a treasure and a contamination. The Archmagos who eventually examine Matthias's sarcophagus are fascinated by the Ork modifications, not because they have any value, but because studying them helps understand how greenskin technology interfaces with Imperial systems. This knowledge might be used to design better defenses, to create countermeasures, to ensure that future dreadnoughts cannot be so easily tampered with. For the Ordo Xenos, the incident becomes another data point in their endless catalogue of Ork capabilities and tendencies. The Inquisition maintains files on major Ork war bosses, tracking their movements, their technologies, their successes and failures. That the Orks could modify a dreadnought to the point of functionality, even temporarily, is noted with concern. If they can do this with one, what's to stop them from doing it with many? What if a particularly clever mech boy figured out how to properly interface with dreadnought systems? The nightmare scenarios are enough to justify increased surveillance of Ork-held territories and more aggressive responses to Ork looting operations. For the Space Marine chapters themselves, stories like Matthias's serve as both warning and inspiration. They are reminded that no brother is truly lost until his gene seed fails or his name is forgotten. Even 500 years of captivity cannot erase the bonds of brotherhood or the duty owed to honored ancients. Chapters that might have considered a lost dreadnought irretrievable, that might have performed funeral rites and moved on, are encouraged to maintain hope and continue searching. At the same time, they are reminded of the importance of securing their dead and their equipment. Battlefield recovery becomes even more critical when you understand that leaving a dreadnought behind means potentially condemning its pilot to centuries of Xenos captivity. Some chapters implement new protocols, designating specific squads whose sole mission during retreat is to ensure that no dreadnought is left behind, even if it means other losses. The psychological impact on other dreadnought pilots cannot be underestimated either. Many of them already struggle with the isolation and peculiarity of their existence. Learning that one of their number spent 500 years as an orc curiosity before being rescued adds a new dimension to their fears. Some find it inspiring, proof that the Emperor protects even in the darkest circumstances. Others find it terrifying, a reminder of just how vulnerable they are when dormant. A few request modifications to their sarcophagi, adding self-destruct mechanisms that can be activated if capture seems imminent, preferring oblivion to the possibility of such a fate. The Orks, of course, remain largely oblivious to all of this. They don't ponder the philosophical implications of their actions or worry about the larger consequences of looting Imperial equipment. They simply see something shiny and take it, try to make it work, and fight with it if they can. The fact that they occasionally stumble across something as significant as a dreadnought is pure happenstance from their perspective, no different than finding a good tank or a working generator. That humans attach so much importance to these machines strikes them as typically Humy silliness, though they're happy to exploit that importance if it means getting a good fight out of it. Some war bosses who hear the tale of the Red Menace become obsessed with capturing their own Humy walk-in machine, seeing it as the ultimate trophy and proof of their own might. A few succeed, at least temporarily, adding their own chapters to the ongoing saga of Orks versus Dreadnoughts. Most fail spectacularly, learning the hard way that Space Marines don't take kindly to Xenos mucking about with their honored dead. There are stranger outcomes too, scenarios that the Imperium barely acknowledges and the Orks themselves don't fully understand. Occasionally, the modifications made by Ork mech boys actually improve certain aspects of a Dreadnought's performance, at least by crude metrics. An Ork-modified weapon might have greater rate of fire, even if it's less accurate and more prone to overheating. Ork armor plating might be more resistant to certain types of damage, even if it's ugly and poorly designed by Imperial standards. Some tech marines, the more pragmatic or desperate ones, have been known to study these modifications and incorporate refined versions into their own work. They would never admit to learning from Xenos, of course. Such admission would be heretical, but they might coincidentally design a weapon mounting that bears suspicious similarity to Ork engineering, or incorporate an armor configuration that just happens to resemble modifications observed on recovered dreadnoughts. Knowledge, even knowledge gained from Xenos, can be valuable when properly filtered through the lens of Imperial superiority. And in the endless war that consumes the galaxy, any edge, however small, can make the difference between victory and defeat. Then there are the dreadnoughts that are never recovered, that remain in Ork hands until their systems finally fail or the pilot dies. These become objects of legend among the greenskins, the sort of story that gets told and retold until it bears little resemblance to what actually happened. In some Ork enclaves, there are shrines to particularly successful looted vehicles, places where mech boys bring offerings of scrap and oil in the hope that Gork and Mork will bless their own projects. Some of these shrines feature dreadnoughts, or parts of dreadnoughts, incorporated into larger structures or worshipped as examples of the finest loot imaginable. To the Imperium, this is blasphemy of the highest order. To the Orks, it's just good sense. If something was strong enough to be worth keeping, then obviously it deserves some respect, even if it's broken now. The circular logic is perfect in its simplicity and utterly maddening to anyone trying to understand it from an Imperial perspective. But this is the nature of the Ork mind, practical in its own way, but operating on principles that bear no resemblance to human rationality. For Matthias specifically, his story does not end with his recovery. After the initial reunion with his chapter, after the joy of homecoming fades into the routine of continued service, he must grapple with what happened to him. 500 years is a long time, and the Imperium he returns to is not the one he left. Battle doctrines have evolved. New enemies have emerged. Brothers he once knew are centuries dead, their names carved on monument walls. The chapter itself has changed. New traditions established, old ones modified or abandoned. He is a relic returned to a world that has moved on without him, and finding his place in it proves challenging. The psychological weight of his captivity also lingers. He dreams, in whatever way Dreadnought pilots dream, of his time in Ork hands. The sensation of helplessness, of being unable to act while Xenos violated his chassis, haunts him. He speaks of this with the chapter's chaplains, seeking guidance and absolution. They assure him that he bears no blame, that he endured with honor, that his recovery and survival are testament to the Emperor's protection. These words help, but they don't erase the memories. Nothing can erase them. They are part of him now, another scar to add to the collection of wounds he carries. Yet he endures, because that is what Space Marines do. He returns to service, taking his place in the chapter's reclusium when not needed for battle, standing vigil alongside other dreadnoughts, both ancient and newly interred. When war calls, he answers, his weapons speaking with the authority of centuries of combat experience. The Ork modifications are long gone, replaced with properly consecrated Imperial equipment. But the memory of that time influences how he fights. He is more cautious about being separated from support, more vigilant against being overrun and captured. Some might call it trauma. He calls it tactical wisdom purchased at a high price. And when young Space Marines come to seek his counsel, asking about the enemies he's faced or the battles he's fought, he sometimes tells them about the 500 years, not to frighten them, but to illustrate the importance of never giving up, of maintaining hope even in the darkest circumstances. He tells them that the Emperor protects, not through magic or divine intervention, but through the bonds of brotherhood and the determination of those who refuse to abandon their own. His captivity, his survival, his recovery, all serve as a lesson in what it means to be a Space Marine. You do not abandon your post. You do not surrender to despair. You endure. In the grand span of the galaxy's history, Matthias's story is a small one. Millions of warriors fight and die every day across countless battlefields. Entire worlds burn and are forgotten. The loss and recovery of a single dreadnought should be statistically insignificant, barely a footnote in the endless war. But significance is not measured only in numbers or strategic impact. Sometimes it's measured in the individual, in the difference one story makes to those who hear it. Matthias's survival gives hope to other dreadnought pilots that they too might be recovered if the worst happens. His recovery validates the efforts of those who search for lost brothers, proving that such missions are not futile gestures, but vital duties. His ability to return to service despite everything demonstrates that even the most profound violation can be overcome through faith and determination. These lessons ripple outward, influencing decisions, shaping attitudes, reinforcing the values that hold the Imperium together. In this way, a single ancient warrior's captivity and recovery becomes part of the larger mythology of the Adeptus Astartes, another story in the endless collection of tales that define what it means to be a Space Marine. The Orks, who took him captive, most of them dead now in the fighting that followed the Imperial Strike Force's arrival, leave their own legacy. The mech boys, who worked on the Dreadnought, the ones who survived, carry knowledge gained from the experience. They know now what Hume walk-in machines look like on the inside, at least partially. They've learned which bits are important and which bits can be removed or replaced. This knowledge spreads through the Ork equivalent of teaching, which is mostly just showing other mechs what you did and letting them figure out the rest. Future encounters between Orks and Dreadnoughts might be influenced by this knowledge, making the greenskins slightly more effective at disabling or capturing such machines. Not much more effective, because Orks are still Orks, and subtlety is not their strong suit, but enough to be noticed by Imperial commanders who find themselves fighting the same Ork warbands that have this particular area of expertise. It's a small thing, easily lost in the chaos of galactic warfare, but it's there nonetheless. Another tiny example of how knowledge transfers even between the most incompatible of species. The world where Matthias was found eventually falls under full Imperial control again, the Orks purged or driven off to cause trouble elsewhere. The ruins of the fortress monastery where he once served are excavated and examined by historians and tech priests, looking for salvageable technology and historical records. They find the chamber where he was entombed, see the evidence of the Ork presence, piece together what happened. Their findings are compiled into reports that add to the vast archives of the Administratum, data that might be referenced by future scholars or forgotten entirely, depending on the whims of bureaucratic fate. The planet itself is reconsecrated, its taint cleansed through prayer and fire, and eventually it may be resettled or claimed by another chapter, or simply left as a monument to those who fell defending it. In the end, it's just another world among millions, just another battlefield in the endless war. But for a time, it was the stage for a drama that involved an ancient warrior and the greenskins who found him, a collision of cultures so different that understanding between them was impossible, yet interaction was inevitable. This is the reality of the galaxy in which these stories unfold. There is no true peace, no final victory. There is only war, an endless grinding struggle where the same patterns repeat across different worlds and different times. Orks will always loot. Dreadnoughts will always sleep. Space Marines will always fight to recover their lost brothers. And somewhere, on some forgotten battlefield yet to be decided, another ancient warrior will be buried in rubble or lost in retreat, their sarcophagus entering stasis, beginning another 500-year wait that might end in recovery or might end in something far stranger. The cycle continues, unbroken, eternal, grinding ever onward through the centuries. This is the grim darkness of the far future, where even death offers no release, and even the honored dead cannot rest. Where hope persists not because the odds are good, but because the alternative is unacceptable. Where warriors who should have died long ago continue to fight because duty demands it and brotherhood sustains it. Where even the most sacred can be defiled, yet what is defiled can be reconsecrated. Where the absurd and the terrible exist side by side. Where orcs can turn tragedy into comedy without even trying, and where ancient warriors endure indignities that would break lesser beings, yet emerge still dedicated to their cause. Matthias fights on, as do countless others like him, ancient souls locked in metal shells, waiting between battles for the call that summons them to war. Each awakening is a reminder of what they've lost and what they continue to protect. Each return to stasis is a small death, a surrender to the darkness with the faith that they will wake again when needed. It's not the existence they would have chosen, not the fate they imagined when they first donned power armor as newly initiated Space Marines. But it's the fate they've been given, and they bear it with the same determination that has always characterized the Adeptus Astartes. They endure, they serve, they remember, and when the Orks or any other enemy threatens what they hold sacred, they wake with fury and purpose, their weapons thundering righteousness across battlefields that span the galaxy. This is what happens when the ancient and the chaotic collide, when 500 years of sleep meets greenskin curiosity, when the venerable is violated and subsequently restored. It's a story that has played out before and will play out again, each iteration unique in its details, but similar in its fundamental themes. War, captivity, endurance, recovery. The eternal cycle of the 41st millennium, where there is only war, and in that war, every soul must find their own path through the darkness. If you enjoyed this deep look into one of the strangest possible encounters in the Warhammer 40k universe, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more lore videos exploring the weird, the terrifying, and the absolutely bizarre corners of the grimdark future. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even the sleep of the just offers no guarantee of peace.